Surprise video, think fast. I know I don't usually do more than like 2 videos a week, but this is a special video because last night, when I was making part 1 of this theory about whether or not Skrills and Night Furies are related, I ran out of time, and I didn't want to bring it out next week because that would disrupt my schedule, and I cannot disrupt my schedule. So yeah, last night I was exhausted, and the video was already a lot longer than I had originally intended, and I was at this awkward point where I sort of had like a summary of the arguments for them being related, but I hadn't yet addressed kind of all of the parts where they're not related. And I sort of had to make a decision, do I make a second video with all of the remaining parts of the video that kind of address that whole side of the theory? So I split it into 2. And that's what this video is. But that's why the first part feels a little bit disjointed. I sort of just went, here are some similarities. I never actually said whether or not the Skrill and Night Fury are evolutionarily related. So here is the next part of the video, and I will be wearing a different shirt because this was filmed yesterday, so bear with me. Oh, and 2 things. Number 1, I highly recommend you go watch the first part of this video before you're watching this part, because this is a lot more haphazard. And number 2, thank you to the people who went and bought TwotheFuture t-shirts. There's a link to that down in the description below. But to give you a quick summary, we were looking at whether or not the Night Furies and the Skrills, 2 of the most dangerous dragons in existence, were evolutionarily related by looking at some of the similarities between them, which is sometimes a good gauge, but not really that good of a gauge overall. There are some exceptions to this kind of rule. But principally speaking, we know that birds are more related to one another than, say, the sparrow is to the tiger, because birds obviously have similarities. We talked about the unusual amount of similarities that they have in their skills, the similarities in their skeletal structure, like in their the shape of their skull and the ridges along their back, a peculiar similarity in how they use their fire blasts by looking at the ridges along their back, which happen to conduct and store energy, it seems, and similarities in that they both have a lot to do with lightning. But onto it. Now, while all of these similarities may lead us to suspect that the Skrill and the Night Fury share a common ancestor, there is actually another alternative way to explain it, a thing called convergent evolution. Once again, this is one of those complex, detailed, nuanced things, and I am not a biologist, but I'll give it a shot at explaining it simply. This is where 2 species evolve to be similar to one another in some way because they both face similar pressures in their environment. For example, both insects and bats developed the ability to fly with wings. Does that mean that they're related? Well, no, it just means that they were both in the environment where they needed to develop the ability to fly, and wings were the most efficient way to do that. This may very much be the case for a lot of the similarities that we've talked about between Skrills and Night Furies. They both have slender forms and relatively angular body shapes, especially the Night Fury, but this may have evolved as a way for them both to become more aerodynamic when they are flying. The fact that they both have a relatively flat skull may not mean that they share a common ancestor. It may just mean that they both faced similar evolutionary pressures, and that the best way to deal with those was to become more aerodynamic. Hence, both the Skrills and Night Furies had that sort of shape. Likewise, both Skrills and Night Furies are extremely adept at flying at very high altitudes. We can see this with their wingspan and the way that their wings are constructed. Now, this is mostly for hunting reasons, and once again, this doesn't mean that they necessarily shared a common ancestor. Or at least, if they did share a common ancestor, then it would be so far back as to be a common ancestor with a lot of other dragons, so that there wouldn't be a special connection between the Skrill and Night Fury. But it's hard to say. Anyways, the ability to fly at high altitudes may just be because it's an incredibly efficient way to hunt, diving down to get fish or whatever. Or it could be the best way to avoid predators by flying far above them, out of their reach. Whatever the predator of a Night Fury and a Skrill once was. Once again, it doesn't necessarily mean they shared a common ancestor, just that they had similar evolutionary pressures to deal with, and that they both dealt with it in a similar way. As for the whole lightning similarity that we talked about before, Skrills store energy in their spines along their back, and it gives them unlimited shots, provided they're in a storm. And a similar thing seems to happen to Toothless at the end of the second movie. He appeared to have an unlimited number of shots while in that Night Fury alpha mode, and also interestingly, Night Fury eggs have to be struck by lightning in order to hatch. I'm personally not sure how to explain this with convergent evolution. Like, there just seems to be too many connections between them around lightning for it to be ignored entirely, and energy storage and stuff like that. But there may be people who are a lot smarter than me down in the comments who can tell you a way that could be explained. So if you have an idea, please let me know down in the comments below. It's possible that they both adapted to living in an area with storms. After all, they can both fly at extremely high altitudes. It's not surprising that they would have to deal with lightning at one point or another. And this could happen anywhere in the world. So maybe this was left over from a common ancestor? Hard to say. But the most important difference between them that I did touch on earlier in the video is the number of limbs that each of them have. The Skrill is of course a wyvern with its forearms blended with its wings, while Toothless is a quadruped. He has 4 legs and wings on his back. I just checked, and wings do count as limbs, which means that Toothless is in fact a hexapod, which in turn makes the Skrill a quadruped. And this is a major difference between the two dragons. Skeletal structures take a long time to evolve, especially something like growing another set of limbs. And while it is fair to suggest that the Skrills seem to have had a 6th spine that attached to the side of their body, growing another set of limbs is pretty rare in evolution. If they do share a common ancestor, then it is way back. Interestingly, there is some implication of dragons evolving extremely quickly, as in at a rate that would be unheard of in our world. There's this group of speed stingers found in the episode The Next Big Sting, which have developed webbed feet, possibly over a few generations, though they may have had it for a lot longer than that, and we just never met the speed stingers before them. But that is definitely not on the same level as developing extra limbs. So are Skrills and Night Furies evolutionarily related? Yes, there do seem to be a number of curious similarities between the two of them in their skeleton structures and in their abilities, especially around, lightning, that do suggest a commonality between the two of them that isn't in a lot of other dragons. But no, pretty much all of these things could be explained away by convergent evolution, that they faced similar evolutionary pressures and developed in similar ways. And there may be too many big differences between them to say that they're closely related, in particular the number of limbs. That said, all dragons overall, like all animals overall, whatever species and kingdom they come from, are related in the grander scheme. Like, going way, way back, a long time back, that will take a smarter person than I to tell you. But that is all from me. I hope you enjoyed the second part of the theory. I have a lot of things to do today, so I'm gonna rush and try and finish editing these bits together, and then get that out as soon as I can. I love you guys. Patreon down in the description if you want to support me, and stay nerdy, Furies, and I'll see you in the future.